Man, the first sip of coffee, isn't that like best thing in the world?
Oh, wait a minute. Now, Kevin said that he would be a little bit late. Sandy said she'd be here at the beginning, but had to leave a little early. So I do expect Sandy to be on with us shortly here.
Whoa.
I just texted Sandy to ask her if she was joining.
Okay.
Hey, right off.
I've been talking to her this morning.
She may have had something that went right up to 10.
I don't have access to the materials right now that you sent, Paul.
You don't have access to them?
Yeah, I mean, unless
I've got several things called up on my computer which I can share as we go along.
Yeah, well, I mean, I usually use my other iPad to read all the documents and all that stuff.
The junk I sent you mean? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that stuff.
But I can bring up stuff on the screen, and just so you all know, the sharing the screen is enabled for all of you. So theoretically, if you click on share screen, you can share your own screens.
Theoretically.
Yeah, for people that know how to do that kind of stuff, right?
So Dylan, can you unmute yourself long enough to let me know if we're live with the stream?
Say, I see
Okay,
the
thanks, Dylan.
mute button is gone. So Paul, and I'm trying to pull up the agenda as well, but I believe the first thing that we would normally do is just do introductions. Is that correct?
That's correct. A welcome and introduction. So that's on you, Paul.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. Excuse me. I know that we've got a few people that are otherwise occupied. This is my very first meeting, so what I'd like to do is just do the introductions on who's on the call, and then at the end I'll do a kind of just a quick hi, this is me. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
So I'm not sure how the priority would go. Paul, how would you normally do the introductions?
Well, normally we just kind of go by who you're seeing on the screen and start and work around.
Let's start with Mr. Caswell. He's looking right at me. Cashwell.
Yeah, I am. John Cashwell, I'm a state representative from our state, commissioner from Bangor.
Next to him is Robert Checkaway.
Muted.
I'm Bob Checkaway, one of the state commissioners from Freeport, and you'd think I'd know after all these years how to unmute myself, but I'm still a novice. Welcome, Chairman Downing. Boy, I wish you the best of luck.
I'm still scared. Next on my screen is Mr. Cody.
Good morning, everybody. James Cody, State Commissioner from Farmington, Maine.
Bert is frozen.
What?
You were frozen.
It's warm down here. Anyhow, good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Polchis, also known as Bert Polchis. And I'm a Penobscot commissioner appointed by Chief and Council. I'd like to also welcome our brand new chair, Paul. Good to see you and glad to have you. look forward to working with you, man. And on to the next one.
Representative Newell.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rena Newell. I'm the Passamaquoddy Tribal Representative to the Maine State House of Representatives. Good to see you all. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Mr. Rosen.
Mr. Chair, and greetings from Maine Maritime Academy in Castine. I'm Richard Rosen, State Commissioner, and I live in Bucksport.
Mr. Banks.
Yes, welcome everybody, and welcome and congratulations, Paul, on being our new chairman. I wish you luck. And I'm John Banks. I'm one of the Penobscot Nation's representatives to the commission.
And we have Ezekiel Jordan.
Hi there, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I'm the commissioner for the Holton Band of Maliseets, one of the commissioners.
Excellent. And I think I've got everybody. However, there's a phone of 2670911.
This is Sam St. John for the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians.
Excellent. And the only one who has not introduced himself is Mr. Paul Tebow.
Hi, I'm Paul Tebow, the managing director for the commission.
And so thank you, everyone. My name is Paul Downing. I'm with the Passamaquoddy Tribe Indian Township. I can't believe that you guys have elected me to be your chair. Super honored, super flattered, very humbled in your faith in me. I hope to do a good job. I'm absolutely spinning my wheels, my gears in my head, trying to figure out how to put this all together and what's going to work best for all of you guys. I'm a former council member. I just ended my 4-year tour, prison term, whatever you want to call it, and had fun in the sun. On the national level, I have a couple efforts going. I'm with the NCAI, Public Safety and Tribal Justice Committee. We just met virtually, which was a very unique platform to engage with people, tribes all across the nation. We did do a couple resolutions, very time-consuming process to do a virtual meeting and do the discussions and voting and follow the Roberts rules of it was very tiring. I'll say it like that. But we did get 2 resolutions completed at the national level. And then, of course, I'm with United South and Eastern Tribes. I'm also the chair of their Homeland Security Emergency Services. And that seems to be the realm that I'm currently stuck in a lot, is I do the emergency management, both as a consultant and right now I'm actually the emergency manager for Pleasant Point during this pandemic. So I sympathize with everybody in trying to meet like this. I do this several times a week with different efforts, and I call it Zoom fatigue. It really does it wears on you. So I welcome everybody, and I hope to do good by your faith in me, and I will do everything I can to keep the MITSC mission and do what we need to do, not just for tribes, but obviously the state. And that's going to be the key thing, is that marriage of efforts, that we present things that are beneficial to both tribes and to the state of Maine. And that's going to be a hard position, or a hard thing to figure out, but I think together we can make this all work. So, Mr. Paul, you have the agenda. What's the next thing? I don't see it. I can't pull it up either.
Well, would you like me to share it up on the screen?
Would you please?
Should I put yeah. Gotta find it. So as you can see, the next item is to review the agenda. So,
Right. So in looking at the agenda, we've
So
got the
just,
minutes. Go ahead, sir.
well, we don't normally just do a formal vote on the agenda, but if there's anyone who wants to move something around or make a change or addition, this would be the time to bring that up,
Okay.
showing the rest of it.
It's weird. Sandy didn't text me back.
So if there are any suggestions about altering the agenda, I guess, Paul, you could just go on.
Okay. I'll ask that. Does anyone have any objections to the agenda, or is there any suggested changes to the agenda at this time? And silence is consensus. Mr. Banks?
I just had a question about where this is one of our regularly scheduled meetings, if we would have a section for public input. We normally used to do that when we were meeting in person. But I'm
Okay.
not sure about the technology and if that would work. But I think that's a good idea to consider, getting input from the public when we have our meetings.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're not, if I could respond on that, Paul.
Go for it.
I mean, we're not currently set up to just, have folks come in, but we can give the link to also, we can also use the, the chat feature, and, to, take questions or comments, but with 2-hour meetings, we've been honestly finding that, it's a short time to try to get through, the agendas. But I can try to make arrangements for the next meeting to actually have a piece set aside for that, if you all feel that we should do that.
Well, I'll ask this because I'm the new guy on the block. Is there a provision in the bylaws where anytime that we meet that we have that public engagement?
Well, I don't think the bylaws specifically say that, but I mean, we're complying with the, with the public meeting, obligation by providing the audio stream. But
okay.
But we can, I mean, if you'd like me to make that part of the routine with meetings, I would work with Dylan, our IT guy, to do that.
John, I'll ask you directly. Do you think that's a good idea? I mean, you suggested it, but would you think that if we can do it technology wise, that every time that we meet, that we have that public engagement or ability?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. When we were meeting in person, there was a lot of interest by many members of the public, and they had a lot of good input to some of the things that the commission was deliberating on. So I think it's a good idea, but I certainly would, defer to the other commission members as well here.
I mean, if I could, I would add that, yes, I mean, when we're having in-person meetings, there were folks who frequently came, other than the commission members. And when I think back when we started doing the Zooms, there was a concern that, the Zoom would break down on us if we have at a in-person meeting in the Zoom. But I could confer with Dylan about that. I mean,
yeah, Paul, I've been on several other Zoom meetings where they do allow questions, any
Right.
comments from the public, either through the chat function or through the question and answer function.
Or
Yeah,
a Zoom
well, that's-
webinar too.
I guess I'm just bringing up the possibility that we just expand the Zoom, but we didn't initially do that because of concerns that we would have too many and it would break down. But
Somebody just messaged in the box. If you want me to, I can turn on the YouTube chat function if you wanted to take comments from the public today. I think that would be fine. There may be people on here that on the audio stream that have great suggestions. So I don't have a problem with that as long as the rest of the commission doesn't. Silence is
I would only
consensus.
comment that.
Can you see me? Hello.
I'm looking, Bert.
Yeah, I agree with John. In the past, we have had people, from the public, time to ask questions or make suggestions, whatever the case may be. And so I think if we can, we should have that in place, because like you said, Paul, there are people who do have some, suggestions that we as a commission can actually use. But then again, what is our place as a commission? This is the tribal state commission, and those people from the public are part of the state, or in some cases, even part of our various tribes, and we need to give them that option.
Paul, you started to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that if we're going to open up that, which I'm not saying is a bad idea, but we have a 2-hour meeting. And so if we're going to do it, get it through our agenda, I do think that we should reserve it for and I think this is what we did at the in-person meetings, is if we had time at the end,
Okay.
we would do that. So I take it there's a consensus that we ought to have Dylan turn on that feature so that folks can submit questions or comments.
Yes, and then if we have time at the end, we can address those.
One of the ways.
Okay, so Dylan out there.
One of the ways is possibly if there are people that are sending their questions or suggestions across. I don't know how they do it. I think through a message box or something like that. Maybe you can keep track of those, so later on, when we have that chance to maybe open it up for those questions, you can read them off. Let us know who's asking or who's suggesting.
I believe that'll. So yeah, so I gather there's a consensus we should do it. And Dylan, if you're out there, we would like you to activate that so that folks can submit questions and comments, and we will try to get to them. And if not, if there are things that I can respond to after the meeting, I'll follow up and do that. So.
Perfect. So the next agenda item is the review and approval of minutes for September 8th and October 13th.
Right. I've provided those draft minutes to you, and we're catching up on September because October was a special meeting where we didn't address approval of minutes.
Right. And Mr. Banks was the co-chair at the time for those particular minutes. I don't know your process, Paul, on how do you.
Well, normally someone, we give enough time for folks to, look at the minutes, and that's if if anyone has any proposed changes, they would bring that up, and otherwise someone would make a motion. And I assume we should address them in order. So September 8th would be, the first set to address.
This is Cashwell. I moved both minutes.
Second,
It was John
So-
Banks.
yeah. I think
Never-
somebody else did too at the exact same time.
That's okay, take it.
So we've had a motion, it's been seconded. And do you just normally do a vote at this time, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, so calling it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Anyone?
I
Anyone opposed at this time, say nay. Hearing none, the minutes are approved for September and October. Moving on, we have, I'm sorry, Mr. Checkaway.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I wasn't fast enough to get in before the break before the agenda. I just wanted to mention for anybody who is following us from the general public, there is a spot on the website for contact. So if you don't want to be brave enough to go through the Zoom process, or if you want to just be anonymous or something, it's right on the website. It's MITSC.org. Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir.
So
The next, go ahead, Paul.
yeah, next would be the financial report. Paul, do you want me to keep the agenda up on the screen at this point, or just bring it back up if we want to go
Bring
back?
it back up after.
Okay.
That way we can see everybody.
That's a lot better.
Okay, so and Paul, so normally I do a written managing director report which incorporates the financial report. Generally, I rely primarily on the written report, and I point out some specific things that I think ought to be brought up verbally, and then just open it to any questions or that the commissioners have. So the financial portion of the report, again, referring to the written report, I won't go through all of that. Just mention that you have, and Paul, so each month there are 3 financial reports basically that get provided. There's a monthly profit and loss, there's a year-to-date profit and loss, and a balance sheet. And those are the 3 reports that we routinely provide to the commissioners. If you want me to give the total current balance that we have in the Machias Savings Bank, I can do that.
I think that would be the easiest thing because
Okay.
I'm looking at all these spreadsheets. I'm like, no.
Well, the balance sheet is through October 31st. So we have had almost 3 weeks. We've had at least 1 payroll. So the current balance of our total savings and checking as of this morning was 199,175. So,
Okay.
Just as the report says, the MITSC's request for the next state biennium funding has been submitted. And I think I sent out a copy of what was actually submitted. Very briefly, it makes the pitch for an increase of state funding of $92,000 a year, which is based on my best estimate of what we would need to have a second professional level position and have that be sustainable. I wanted to mention that we have arranged for another audit. We had a clean audit for the last fiscal year. We have made arrangements to do an audit this year. It was my understanding that the commission, wants to have annual audits now. The commission went a long time without having audits, but we had one last year and we want to stick with that. So that is currently scheduled to be done on December 4th. And it's going to have to be, they want to do it remotely because of the virus situation. So, and it might get postponed again because of the virus situation and how that's backing them up. But as things stand, we plan to do the quote unquote on-site portion of the audit remotely on December 4th. And Pat Malar, who contracts with us to do our bookkeeping and financial stuff, she would be providing them by scan documents that they would normally just be looking at in the office. So that's scheduled for December 4th at this point. So that's what I have for the financial piece. Just ask if there are any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns at this time about the financial report?
Move approval.
Mr. Caswell has made the motion to approve.
Second.
I hear a second from Mr. Polches. Do we vote? And I'll ask this because I'm new. Do we vote on every item like this, Paul?
Not necessarily, but last meeting, the commissioners did vote to approve. I believe they did vote to approve the financial report.
Okay.
But it's not. I don't think it's necessarily. We haven't always done that. But.
Okay.
Oh, judges.
John, you have an objection?
But there was a motion and a second, so.
Right. So at this time, let's just go ahead and vote on it real quick. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
See all the hands up. And if we have any objections, now's the time to raise your hand. Seeing none, I'd say that is approved and moving forward, Mr. Tebow.
Yes, thanks, Paul. The next thing on my report, the written report, is kind of a summary of the work planning that we started. That was we had an initial meeting on work planning on October 13th. There's a list of potential work plan items, both substantive items and administrative internal issues. I was asked at the October 13th meeting to expand on that, to provide more detail about the various potential work plan items. And I sent all of you an expanded version of that. And the work plan process, we understand, is an ongoing thing with the ultimate goal of actually producing a written work plan, and it's on the agenda today to continue that discussion. And so we'll get to work planning, as part of the whole business. The only other thing in my written managing director report is kind of a summary of the administrative and other projects that I've been working on since the last report, and I'm not going to go through all that. It's I'll just rely on the written report. But again, if there are any questions about the managing director report, this would be the time.
Do we have anybody that would like to address anything on this written report? I see nobody hands raising, so I'd say that we move on to the next item, Paul, which looks to be, and I just had these dang documents up.
Yes, and that would be
talking about the old business.
Right. The next item, we're into old business.
Right.
The first item under old business is to continue discussing the potential formation of a nonprofit education research entity. I would pose to you, Paul, whether we might want to defer that just long enough to take action on the second agenda item, which is the
Yes.
motion to amend the bylaws regarding stipends.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. So if there's no objections, I'd like to move directly to B. The motion to amend the bylaws regarding your stipends. As long as I have no objections from the rest of the commission.
Okay.
And I think Paul Tebow had done he on one of the emails, where is it? You did the proposed amendment regarding stipends.
Yes, and I'm looking.
I'm looking for. I got it.
I'm putting it up. I'm putting
okay.
it up on the screen.
There we go.
So, if I could, Paul, I'll probably
Go
just
ahead.
provide a little summary or background here.
Yep.
This is an issue that's come up over the last year or so because to clarify whether or not commissioner stipends are limited only to the full commission meetings, and the Jamie, the former chair, and and John and Kevin, the acting co-chairs before you were selected, have all, I think, had the same view that it shouldn't be that limited, because the statute and the bylaws actually refer to services by the commission, and not just to appointments to the full MITSC meetings. So this amendment is responsive to that, and basically would incorporate in the bylaws what has already been adopted as the policy, that would extend the stipends to other meetings and gatherings other than just the full commission meetings.
Right.
So, and do you want, you all can see it there, I think, but I can read through it and indicate what's different if you want me to.
Could you just identify the difference between the previous wording and what you're proposing here?
The basic difference here is that in addition to commission meetings, this makes it clear and is consistent with what the chairs have adopted over the last year, is that it would include committee meetings, working groups of the commissioners that might not have been formally set up as committees, and tribal and state governmental proceedings dealing with commission related issues. And the obvious example of that recently has been that numerous commissioners have attended hearings in Augusta regarding the task force recommendations and the legislation. And they've been encouraged to do that, and the sense is that they ought to get stipends for, and they have gotten stipends for that. And other events organized, sponsored, or promoted by MITSC that are attended by commissioners. And it also would clarify that attendance at remote meetings, proceedings, and events, and remote at otherwise in-person remote attendance that would otherwise be in-person meetings will be treated the same as in-person attendance. So in other words, a meeting like this that's done by Zoom, you still get a stipend for that. And just to clarify, the stipends, these are not big stipends. I mean, these are by statute stipends of $75. So, so that's what the amendment would be.
So when Paul and I talked about this briefly the other day, my personal feeling is, because we're coming into this new norm, like we don't even know what normal is yet. This may be the standard meeting for a period of time until they get this pandemic under control. Um, and anything that encroaches on somebody's time availability, I think that justifiably they should get that $75. So I'm fully in support of this, and I guess at this point we could open the floor up to questions. Does anyone have any questions pertinent to this particular change? Mr. Rosen?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, but my concern is that it's it's overly broad and ambiguous. I think it should certainly include clarity around meetings that are in the virtual platform, because that absolutely is a reality.
Mhm.
But I would be more comfortable having it narrowed to read that the services that are eligible for per diem payments and related expenses are eligible for reimbursement shall include commission meetings and committee meetings, period, hard stop, and then the clarification around the remote to make sure that that's understood, that that's covered. So I toss that out as a discussion point. It would narrow the definition, but I think that would add some clarity and avoid ambiguity in the future.
Mr. Polches?
Yeah, I somewhat agree with that. Because I mean, our commission meetings, whether it's a full commission meeting, which is a public meeting as well, but also we do have our committee meetings, which essentially are working groups. So we might be able to knock out the working groups part, because usually when we're meeting as on committees, that is what we're doing. We're working on certain issues that we're tasked with. Events organized, sponsored, or promoted by MITSC. The way I look at those are, in essence, our committee meetings as well. I know that there's like when we had this people going to the task force meetings, that was questionable. We did have um, commissioners attending those meetings when they were in person. But I do agree that also that when the time, because everybody's time is valuable, and sometimes we have to put aside a lot of things that trying to make that space in order to do what we do as a commission. That is working time. So but I do agree, for the most part, with oh, I just did something. I don't know what I did. Anyway, with the last comment anyway. So I'm sorry.
Looking,
I got
Mr.
mixed up here.
Cashwell, sorry.
Yeah, I have to leave at 10:45, but I suggest that we just table this to the next meeting and shorten that thing up. And if you have to consult with Richard to see how we do it, or others, we can't spend all morning wordsmithing this thing.
I'll agree with that. If we have no objections to tabling it for further discussion, Paul, how would we do that?
Well, just, I guess somebody needs to make a motion to table it. I think John Cashwell just did.
I believe I did.
Do we have a second on that motion, Mr. Banks?
Yeah, I'll second the motion, but I'd also like to add that I would invite Richard to come up with some language to accomplish what he was thinking about doing here.
Sure. Just to not belabor it, but my suggestion would be that it be commission meetings, committee meetings, period, and then just adding a last sentence about in person. But I can draft that out.
And I can also do the same. Just looking at it, Mr. Tebow can look at it. So we have a motion to table. It's been seconded by Mr. Banks. By a show of hands, all in favor, just,
I have one other comment.
oh, go ahead, Mr. Banks, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, everything is covered. I mean, if we're going to anything that's, we're representing the commission as a
Right.
commissioner, it should be covered. But, I agree with Richard that the language really should be tightened up a little bit. Thank you.
And I think that was what Paul's intention was. Not to belabor the point, we've got to vote. We're going to table it and get further language. But the intent was to make it a little bit more inclusive, or just to justify. Let's say that Ezekiel had to go to Augusta on a MITSC meeting, etc., or business related issue, that it's not part of the commission or the actual committee meeting. He goes to Augusta, he should be entitled that stipend if he's doing MITSC related work. And I think that was what the intention was. So we'll move on to the next item at this point. I didn't hear any, everybody is in favor of tabling it, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I have to leave this meeting.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you for your brief stay here, and it's always a pleasure.
yeah, I hope we get off to a faster start next time. Thank you.
I'm still learning.
No, it's not you.
Have a good day. Paul, the next item.
The next item on the agenda, which we flipped with that item, is to discuss, further discuss the possible formation of a nonprofit entity. And just to introduce this issue, Bob and I were tasked with doing some work on this. And Bob, you're muted right now, but would you want to chime in here and summarize kind of where we're at with this?
Sure. I don't think we're at a point where we need the commission to vote on anything, but just to keep everybody up to date, the idea of some kind of nonprofit funding vehicle has been with us, I think, as long as I've been on the commission, and we kind of keep going around in a circle between what kind of vehicle we could create and who might contribute to us. We've spent a couple of meetings now looking into what I now call the demand side of the equation, which is what can we create that will accept money? And each time we start to broach that, we wind up inevitably asking, well, what kind of money is out there that we can ask for? So we've gone round and round, and I think we made some progress. Even if we didn't get out of the oval, we're going around faster. We went back to Jamie Louie recently, who I think invented the whole idea of outside funding. And we turned back to what I'm calling the supply side of the equation, which resulted in something of a little bit of a revolution in our thinking. Jamie rattled off one source after another, mainly the Wabanaki Center at the University of Maine, as an alternative or an option for us to turn to in funding that would not require us to form a 501c3 or any other kind of organization, would not require us to do the annual maintenance required for such a thing, which, although it's not great, it requires an annual filing of what IRS laughingly refers to as its Form 990EZ, which is probably 25 pages or more, and would also relieve us of the need to go knocking on doors, which would be the result of another attempt, the kind of original attempt we thought of creating a 501 organization. So I think the way this has been left sort of off the agenda is that we, Paul and I, will go back to Darren Ranko, who's on the Wabanaki Center UMO faculty, and a few others, to see if we can conveniently eat at their table, so to speak, rather than building our own kitchen. And let's see, I've been tasked with, what am I going to do? I'm going to contact the law school and so on, but I'm waiting. I guess the point man will be Darren Ranko, because he's already in a position to handle some of the funding that comes in for research and writing on native state issues. Is that a fair enough summary, Paul?
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, we haven't actually had that conversation with Darren yet, so
he doesn't know.
We don't know yet how viable this is, but we are going to pursue the idea of trying to collaborate with an existing entity, starting as a first choice, we propose with the Wabanaki Center, to see if we could develop that collaborative relationship with them. And if for any reason that isn't going to go anywhere, my feeling is that we should nevertheless pursue the idea of developing a collaboration with an existing entity at this point, rather than leaping right into trying to create our own nonprofit. By creating our own nonprofit, we would be putting ourselves in the place of becoming a competitor rather than a collaborator with other entities. And as Jamie has put it, there's a hell of a lot of nonprofits out there right now. And with the COVID situation, it's a lot of competition for limited resources. So I believe we should really try to explore this idea of trying to develop a collaborative with an existing entity that already has the tax status and the organizational status. And then if we have some success through that in funding, the particular projects, or even possibly getting someone who's willing to fund the collaborative itself, then we could revisit at some point whether we want to actually have our own entity. Although my inclination would be, if a collaboration works, we probably would stick with that. So.
Right. So I wonder, as you're discussing this, every tribe is a nonprofit agency, every tribal government. So it would almost seem like this would be something that if we could meet with the 5 tribal chiefs at the same time, have some sort of formal meeting, they by the nature of their tax status, it would seem like why reinvent the wheel, I think, is what my brain's trying to say. And just do that collaboration effort with, I'm sorry, Rena has her hand up.
Go ahead and finish and then.
No, go ahead. I'm just thinking, why reinvent the wheel? Keep going.
I think, can I just raise the question as to if you can just kind of summarize or expand upon the topic in regards to education and research? Bobby kind of mentioned native state issues. Can I just get a little bit more of a summary on the intent?
Well, Rena, you have put your finger on the salient issue. We've been around. When I say we've been around the oval a few times, each time we come up with an idea for a vehicle, 501c3, and there are alternatives. The question always becomes, well, what are we going to do with the money if we get it? And it's only been in the last week or so that the off public record conversation has turned to, yeah, what are we going to do with it? And I think the the momentum has been building toward something having to do with education. We, as the commission, would bust anybody's tax exemption if we were involved in lobbying activities. So I can't think of much else that we would be allowed to seek funds for and spend money for other than research. And we haven't really narrowed it down much more than that, which is one reason why, even if we don't partner with the Wabanaki Center, we ought to at least find out what they're doing and what they think we might be able to do that would be a good use of funds. And we'd be delighted to hear from you if you've got some ideas.
Thank you for that. Thank you for answering my question. I think
Paul, can I follow up on that?
Oh, did everybody freeze?
Sorry, yes, please, Paul.
I would just, I guess, add to what Bob said, or to give some more context. I mean, I think, you know, as it's been discussed, especially between Jamie and I, it's always been, you know, we were always thinking in terms of this being an education/research kind of entity. I mean, the genesis of this really is that, you know, because we are statutory, such a funny looking animal, that it is hard, it has been hard for the commission to go out and get non-governmental funding. There have been very limited success in getting other types of funding, even though our statute clearly authorizes us to go get money wherever we can get it. That's been the initial idea. I mean, the fact is, education and research expends its limited resources. The primary example being the Suffolk University report that drained, you know, the resources of the commission to the point where the commission couldn't sustain a full-time executive director. And I think the vision, as I've understood it, is to have an entity that would do research and education that the commission would probably want to do anyway if it had the money to do it, and to have it done in a way that is perceived as, you know, professional and credible and objective, and wouldn't require us to send our money out to somebody like Suffolk Law School, you know, we'd be able to generate these things from an entity that's actually, you know, connected with MITSC. That's always been my understanding of it. And as far as you know, the idea of going to a collaborator, an existing corp entity, that's always been kind of out there as an option. You know, one idea was to do it ourselves. The other has always been that maybe we look for a sponsor, a collaborator who already has the entity in place. And that kind of led us to this idea of trying to do a collaboration with, you know, with the Wabanaki Center. And again, if for any reason that isn't fruitful, I personally think we ought to explore whether there are other entities that, you know, we could create that kind of collaboration with, rather than, as Paul put it, reinventing the wheel. As far as bringing the tribes together to do it, I think that got kicked around at one point, but I guess my sense of it is it would be preferable to go to I don't know what's the right word, more neutral existing entity, rather than have it be, you know, a tribally sponsored entity or a state sponsored entity with another entity perceived as sort of being separate.
Go ahead, Rena.
just let me mention, if you're talking about collaborating, And the chair himself mentioned, a possible conversation with the tribal chiefs. Earlier this year, the chiefs came together and formed the Wabanaki Alliance, which is registered as a 501c4. And a component of that is to do education. So while that's new in its existence, we are in the process of identifying an executive director to move forward with the work of the Wabanaki Alliance. And a component of the Alliance is to conduct education and offer education. So I'm not sure if that'll be a tie in there, but if there's any consideration to be given in addition to the Wabanaki Center, it may not hurt to have a conversation with the Wabanaki Alliance as well.
And I think that was what I was kind of alluding to, is that I knew that there was an effort out there to, Sandy just joined us. I knew there was an effort. And I think what Paul mentioned to me was there are times where the funding has become challenging. And I got a message from somebody, and I think it was Miss Loring said, maybe if the tribes put some skin in the game, that, and I'm like, wait a minute, tribes budgets are already stretched as thin as they could probably get to. And with further cuts and asking the tribes to take a little bit more of their very limited funding and throw it into an effort, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But what you're referring to, Rena, the Wabanaki Alliance, I think could go for those philanthropic organizations that have donations, etc. So I think that's more palatable for me. But again, I'm not the decider. I'm just throwing things out there on the table.
Yes, it's my understanding that the Wabanaki Alliance is currently accepting donations.
Okay. Bert, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think, we have that, the educational part, that's the big thing. And so, we've run into this, and I know Paul Tebow, he knows the stuff that we went through in order to go through, for the Suffolk University, trying to get that research done. That and that is education. The biggest problem that, or one of the biggest problems that we have in doing our jobs as a commission is, goes over to state government. The lack of education, and I'm saying lack of education when it comes to the Settlement Act, and the various issues, regarding the various tribes in the state, and Indian law. So, where the Suffolk University, though it cost, a pretty penny, which we had to come up with, I think it was well worth it. But again, taking the fund, using the funding that we as a commission need to keep on doing what we do, doing our job, it starts getting tapped out. And so I think, I wonder, I know, you mentioned, I like the idea, maybe talking to, what is it called, Rena? The Wabanaki
Alliance.
Yeah, Wabanaki Alliance, but also to the university. But how do we, I was talking to Darren over there at the university, and I try to figure out, well, how does that work? It is education. And I think, Bob, you mentioned the problem that we have in trying to develop an entity, a parallel entity to us as a commission, which would be like more the nonprofit side. That one of the things we run into is that, that it might be deemed, what do you call it? I can't recall the term you used, but lobbying, that's what it was. And so But the information that we can use, okay, and that would be an educational thing. That's developing and pulling together, doing research and all that to develop information, which is used for education, which is also used for education for us as a commission, and to put out there as well. And on the commission side, not the nonprofit side, but the commission, we do our job with the information that's found during those research, as we normally do. I mean, that's all.
So at this point, excuse me, does anyone else have anything in reference to this circular event, this nonprofit discussion? Go ahead, John.
Well, being a lumper as opposed to a splitter, I would be in favor of pursuing both avenues. I think that we should develop a relationship with the Wabanaki Center. And one of the advantages of doing that would be that would connect us to the WAYS program, the Wabanaki and the Youth Sciences program, and that may get us some tribal member students that could work on doing research or gathering data for projects that would be beneficial to the commission. But I also think we should continue to pursue the appropriate tax status to be able to attract grant dollars that aren't governmental to our organization as well.
Mr. Checkaway.
Sorry, John, I don't mean to disagree with you. The problem we've had, it would be very easy to form a 501c3 organization, except for one thing, and there's a page of a table where you have to fill in basically your last 5 years of financial experience or the 5 years you project ahead of you. And to be able to present something like that, we have to know what the answer is, like what money we can expect to get. So I would not at all rule out a 501c3 organization. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do, but we would at least need enough of an idea of what we might put through such an organization to even be able to file the thing. But I got you covered. We can do it.
So, and I know we'll get there eventually, but we've been talking about this work plan, Paul, Thibault, and I. So I think that's going to be one of those movements into a work plan or a possible component of one of the work plans. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dog snoring. I've tried to shoo her, but hey, go lay down. Good Lord. Sorry, I can't hear anything but her snoring. She's a bulldog and she's on her back.
So that's not one of your members?
I would, Paul, how would we do that? Moving that discussion formation into a work plan? Would we make a motion on that?
Well, I mean, it is one of the work plan items now.
Right.
And at the last meeting, Bob and I were tasked with, trying to work on, developing more of an actual proposal. And I think Kevin and Sandy were more or less volunteered to offer support to us on that. So I think it's already been essentially adopted as, a work plan item for us. So I take it, Bob and I think Bob and I feel like we've already been tasked with trying to develop this. So the discussion gives us some more ideas about what to do. And I suggest that we just continue with what we're doing and talk to the people that we've we've identified we need to talk to. And then at the next meeting, when we are talking about work planning, we'll have a further discussion about where we're at with it.
Perfect. Bert's got his hand up.
Yeah, and this is where what we were talking about earlier, about the public being able to send, question and send suggestions, because the public is very diverse. There may be people out there, and I would welcome any suggestions from them as well that we may have overlooked. That maybe give us a little more direction. So this is where that comes into handy. Questions, but also suggestions.
Paul, if I could comment or
Go ahead.
just add something to what Bert just said. I mean, we're already more than an hour into this meeting, and it's a 2-hour meeting.
Right.
Realistically, we are not going to get through all the agenda items in any detail, and not going to have an adequate opportunity to even field, public comments.
Right.
As managing director, I really recommend that we have a special meeting focused on the work plan. And in light of the comments today, that we open that meeting for specifically the purpose of bringing in, ideas from, the public. We've got 14 chat items already, I see here. And
Lord.
So I know it's, we're not meeting in person. We're doing it by Zoom. We don't have to travel. I really strongly recommend that we schedule a special meeting to follow these things up, open it up to comments from outside. And frankly, I think it needs to be more than 2 hours. I mean, we would have had a retreat if we didn't have the virus. And that would have been a weekend-long event.
All right, time out for a second, Paul. My suggestion wasn't meant to open it up to people asking questions, but we have in those little boxes, I guess, a message box or chat boxes or whatever, they can send those suggestions and stuff like that, and somebody can, maybe you or whoever's monitoring that can take those questions, so that way they can transfer that to us, and to you and Bob, and then suggestions. Okay, I'm not saying to open it up to where they can sit there and talk and ask all these things. We don't need to do that right now, but and I agree with you that somewhere down the road we should have that another meeting to open it up to people that can come in and do that as well. So, but for now, I'm thinking they might send those suggestions across in that chat box or whatever you call it. I don't know those things. Anyway,
we've got them now, and we're not going to be able to address them, which is why I'm suggesting that I'm recommending, it's a recommendation that this is important. The commission hasn't done systematic work planning in a long time. We have Paul now in place as the new chair. I think it's well worth the commission's time and resources to have a dedicated special meeting to really get into the work planning. I recommend that we do that in December.
Right. So in looking at exactly what you're talking about, future meeting schedule, item H, that would be something that we can talk about and put in there. I don't disagree. I don't think that you guys have met as regularly as you would have pre-COVID-19. There's been no retreat. So when you have, like, this is our first meeting together. This is my first walk in, here's your chair, get hit in the forehead with a bat. There's too much on here for a 2-hour meeting, in my personal opinion. Having chaired numerous committee meetings between Homeland Security, et cetera, I think that we needed to perhaps cull this down a little bit. But at least now the acknowledgement is there that there is a lot to go over. And I totally support Paul's suggestion of having that different meeting. And I know Paul and I talked about this a lot more, but I'd like to bring it up when we get to that point, just so we can at least check some of the items that are on this list for now, if everybody's in agreement. I see some thumbs up. Oh, Mr. Checkaway.
I agree.
Yes, is there more discussion on that point?
No, I think we're good.
I would only take another minute of the commission's time to end this part on a light note. When I've been going around this oval, I'm reminded as president of Marlon Brando's great movie, The Wild Ones, where he rides in on a motorcycle with his gang of toughs and starts to upset the people in the diner or whatever it is, until one lady asks him, well, what are you rebelling against? And Brando says, I don't know. What do you got? So that's sort of where our nonprofit solicitation stands, is what do you got?
Right. I call it herding cats. I'm the cat herder right now.
Paul, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
In terms of the agenda, I think, assuming that we're moving on, Rena Newell has been with us for the whole meeting. I'm going to suggest that we move her up, so that we make sure that we get the discussion with Rena about the upcoming legislative session.
As long as Representative Newell has no issues with that, I would also like to move her up in the agenda. I see all thumbs up. Silence is consensus.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and join your meeting today. I'm not sure where to start other than, we've gone past the election and gotten past the election, and here we are about to approach the 130th with some uncertainty as to how it's going to be delivered. However, I can say just off my notes, and I did have a conversation the other day with Paul, and I had a conversation earlier this week with Ambassador Dana, as well as Representative Rachel Talbot Ross, who is now the assistant majority leader in the House. So what I will say is, I'm not sure most of you, please add in, and correct my numbers as well. But it's my understanding of the 151 that 80 Dems were elected, 4 independents, and 67 Republicans. So my understanding of the schedule coming up will begin on November 30th with an orientation to the incoming new members, with a mandatory training on December 1st, followed by the swearing-in ceremony on December 2nd. So due to the COVID, it's also my understanding that they have made some adjustments as to how this will be delivered down in Augusta. And to begin with, I think the initial December 2nd swearing-in ceremony will be happening at the Augusta Civic Center. And then on January 6th, the return for the 130th will begin at the Civic Center. So I'm not sure if you're aware of all that have been elected to leadership seats, but I'll quickly go over those. As far as House leadership, the Speaker of the House will be Representative Ryan Fecteau. The House Majority Leader is Representative Michelle Dunphy. Assistant Majority Leader, Representative Rachel Talbot Ross, as I mentioned earlier. The House Republican Leader, again, is Representative Kathleen Dillingham. The newly elected Assistant Republican Leader is Representative Joe Stetkes. And then for the Senate leadership, returning President Senator Troy Jackson. The Senate Majority Leader will be Senator Nate Libby. And the Assistant Majority Leader is Senator Elise Vitale. I always have some time pronouncing her name. Senate Republican Leader, Senator Jeffrey Timberlake, and the Assistant Republican Leader would be Senator Matt Hulot, I believe. So there's your House leadership. So what's to be expected on December 2nd, following the orientation and the mandatory training will be the elections in regards to the constitutional officers. So my expectation and my understanding at this point is that Attorney General Aaron Fry will remain as the AG, the Treasurer Henry Beck, the State Auditor Paula Bulkey, I believe that's her name. So we do expect to see, constitutional officer elected in the area of the Secretary of State. So we have in the running for that seat, replacing the Honorable Matt Dunlap, is Senator Shenna Bellows, Representative Eric Jorgensen, former Representative Tom Bull, Senator Chinette, Representative Craig Hickman, and Representative Matt Moonen. So we should expect that to happen on December 2nd. As we approach the cloture date, which has a possible date of December 18th or maybe December 23rd, in the submitting of bill titles for the 130th. As far as, I just want to mention, as far as the 2094, LD 2094 that went through the 129th, with its beginning starting in 2019, and we all know, that developed into a task force, and then by the end of August, it had gone before the Judiciary Committee, and it was voted out as 3 bills. So the question in approaching the 130th, in revisiting the larger LD 2094, has yet to be fully determined. At this time, it's my understanding in participating in the Wabanaki Alliance meetings with the vice chiefs as well as the chiefs, that there is going to be an upcoming tribal leadership meeting involving the chiefs in regards to revisiting LD 2094 in the 130th and how that might look, whether it'll be resubmitted as a full bill or broken down as suggested back in August when it went before the Judiciary Committee. So that is all I have, but I would like to mention this when you speak about education and research and the importance of education. I think if you remember when the task force committee began meeting, a large amount of that time went to education. So education is very important at the state level. It shouldn't have to start from a starting point each and every session. I'm hoping that a mechanism can be put into place where there's some consistency. So I think it's a great idea that MITSC is working on an education research type of component. The Wabanaki Alliance, as I mentioned, is looking at doing the same thing. So the suggestion in providing some information to the upcoming session is to hold a speaker series. The discussions between Representative Talbot Ross, myself, and Ambassador Dana involve setting up, we're not quite sure how it's going to unfold, but just to identify some speakers that we can line up on the calendar to offer, some education. So I mentioned this to Paul the other day, and Paul graciously accepted the idea of presenting on behalf of MITSC, if it's okay with all of you, around the subject of the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration. Help me out there, Paul.
On the rights of indigenous people.
There you go. Yeah, so that's where we're at right now in our discussions as far as what the speaker series might look like as we approach the 130th. But I cannot echo enough the absolute need to reinforce the need for education. So I think that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take any questions.
So, Rena, and this is Paul. When you refer to education, I have to ask this question. Are you talking about educating legislators on interacting with tribal governments, partnerships, creating, collaborating, et cetera? And that's been an ongoing thing. Just to give you further insight of one of our national efforts, we now have language in the appropriations bill for Department of Homeland Security to actually conduct a level of partnership training working in tribal communities. And we somehow or another were able to convince somebody to include that language. So now Homeland Security actually has to develop a course on how to interact with tribal governments. And the frustration that we have is every time you have a new administration or you have a new set of folks, any new disaster event, anything going on, you have to re-educate those staff members on how to engage with tribal governments. We even witnessed it here during the meeting. There was an individual that was demanding to know what the tribe's position was on a specific item during the MITSC meeting. And I was on council and I'm looking at this guy and you know, it was no fault of his own. He was just like, well, what's the position? Well, you're talking to a sovereign nation. They don't have to tell you their position. Why is it a requirement for them, the tribal government, to tell you what their perception is on a particular item? So that continue education, it shouldn't have to occur each and every time. So I really applaud what you guys are doing, Rena.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's exactly the point. Just trying to find out a mechanism so that that re-education doesn't necessarily have to happen every single session. Yeah. I would add, if any, you know, of the commissioners, as well as Paul, certainly open to any suggestions too as to how to move forward with getting that across.
Well, if I could just add, there was a bill that went through the legislature that required education in the school systems in Maine. Is it LD 21 something or other? I forget the number.
91.
Yeah, that went through many, many years ago. Now, that was a MITSC initiative originally when Governor King was governor, and they were having the annual governors' assemblies of chiefs and governors. They came to the conclusion that, you know, education is so key to going forward. So MITSC created a education subcommittee, and the recommendation that came out of that MITSC education subcommittee was that we seek to get state law amended to require Wabanaki history and culture and governance. And Donna Loring was in the legislature at the time, and she picked up and ran with that bill and got it through the legislature. And so that was the long-term solution. You know, that's the long-term answer. Now, I don't know what the status of that bill is. I don't know, you know, how many school systems have actually followed through and complied with that or not, but that's the long-term solution, I thought.
If I can respond to John Banks, yeah, that certainly is one area of education to be concerned with, and certainly that dates back to 2002, 2003, John, I think. Sponsored by Donna Loring. That has just recently, under this new administration, been reinvigorated. And I think in part it's due to the Commissioner of Education, Penda Macon, in her interest. She set up various meetings in the last 18 or so months, trying to get that movement going on that particular bill. So we may continue to see, that work continue and potentially have that curriculum, as intended, stretched out that way in the form of education through our, elementary schools or high schools. But I think in addition to that, the need to educate, the House members as well as the Senate chamber is equally as important.
Yeah, I agree, and absolutely. And, I think the education process, like you said, that the task force went through was very effective. And so if, to further your idea about institutionalizing some process in the legislature, I don't know if, incoming legislators have required readings that, their leadership would recommend, require. And it should include those reference materials that the task force provided to the Judiciary Committee and the task force.
I see hands going up. Mr. Rosen, we haven't heard from you. I'll call on you.
Thank you. Representative Newell, thank you very much. And thank you for your service in the legislative process. My question, do you know whether the full complement of tribal representatives will be taking their seats in the 130th?
That's a good question. Thank you. I think it would be safe to say that I will be the only representative returning to the 130th. As you may all know, that the Penobscot's representative is now in the form of an ambassador, and I think Bert could probably speak to that a little bit more clearer. I think we would have seen elections taking place at the Houlton Band of Maliseets, and any representative from Houlton could add to this response as well. That question had been posed to me before, and I think if we would have seen some elections at the Houlton Band, then potentially there would have been a representative being sent from Houlton. Zeke, if you want to add to that, I'd appreciate it as well, or Bert.
Well,
I can add to that, Rena. So go ahead, Bert.
As far as I know, at this point, and John Banks can probably make any changes to it, but it's my assumption is that the Penobscot Nation will not, at least at this time. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that, I wanted to ask, actually, as far as the idea, I think that was put forth, that we had some lengthy discussions about it, a suggestion that there would be a permanent committee, not just one that can be, dissolved, at any time, by the state legislature, but the idea of formation of a permanent committee on Indian affairs, that I think the argument that we had then was that it would lessen the need for a constant re-education whenever the legislature changes, But that's why it would have to be a permanent committee. And, so my question is, where is that? I know it was brought up at some point. I can't remember if it was part of the discussion during the with the task force, or I know we talked about it before the task force. So I'll leave it at that.
Was there somebody else that had a hand up?
Zeke,
Sammy from HBMI.
Zeke, go for it.
Oh, Zeke, you can go.
No, go for it, Sam.
I just, Chief Calista has taken more of a proactive role in the legislation side of being a chief. So we haven't had a representative in some years, but yeah, she's doing a lot of the stuff that would constitute a ambassador or representative.
That's as much as I know about it as well.
Go ahead, Paul Thibault.
I just wanted to note or remind folks at this point that LD 2118, which was the tribal consultation, dispute resolution, etc. bill that was drafted and was in the last legislature, but now it was replaced. The language was replaced when they split up 2094. But that had provisions in it that would have institutionalized some of this, that would have created annual assemblies, and that with a role for MITSC to convene and organize those events. I mean, that there were some of those in the past. I participated with Paul Basilka and John Diefenbacher Krall on some of those back in the late 2000s. What was envisioned with 2118 was to kind of expand that and to really institutionalize it in the statute so that it would predictably happen every year. So I bring it up only because 2118 now has effectively fallen by the wayside with the amendments, because it now has completely different language in it. But the question remains whether or not there ought to be something that looks like 2118, presented or pursued, in the next legislature. So I just thought I would mention that.
Sounds good, Rena. And there's been a lot of comments in the chat dialogue, but thank you so much for your time. I'd also have to echo Sandy's thought. I think that I would like to see this, depending on scheduling and everything else. But as we move forward, I think having you provide us just insight what's going on at the state level legislatively. I know there are people on this committee that are in that role, but I don't necessarily get that luxury of finding out at the ground level what's going on. So I think this is very important for this particular body to have you participate with us when time permits. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Absolutely. When I initially took office, I did receive, the invitations from MITSC to join the meetings, and I was participating. So please, extend the invitation in my direction, and definitely I will make certain, as time allows, to participate. I think just before I leave, I think Mr. Rosen, did you have an additional question or comment? I appreciate your question. I think I just want to answer Bert quickly. At the beginning of the 129th, when the tribal chiefs, as I say, as I saw it, it was significant for them to return to the State House to engage in conversations in regards to the bills that were submitted on behalf of the tribes and for many, many state representatives and senators themselves. To convene. And then we saw the direction, in the development of the task force, and, which ultimately led to LD 2094. But we all also know where it ended. But at the beginning of the 129th, there was discussion relating to, I think it was a recommendation in the development of an office, you know, to, you mentioned a committee, Bert, but I think the idea then was to have a designated office that dealt with tribal affairs. I'm not quite sure where that is at this point, but I do recall as well that there was some conversation around that. Is there a need for it? I would say absolutely. I think the need at this point is to be able to allow the tribes to actively engage with the governor's office. You know, I would encourage that from MITSC to help facilitate that discussion, you know, with the tribes and the governor's office. What we saw at the end of 2094 in August, after maybe 18 months, you know, following, you know, the initial conversations through the task force, public hearings, and then committee, was at the end of that, what we sought to have was to have, you know, the engagement early in discussing the changes to the main implementing act. However, it really didn't occur until the very end, you know, in August with the governor's office. So as I leave this conversation, you know, if there's any suggestions by the commission or any method to improve the communications with the governor's office, that would certainly be appreciated. Thank you so much for having me. I'll stick around if I can too. Thanks.
Thank you, Rena. Paul, in looking at the remaining agenda items and looking at the time constraints, we have about 19 minutes. I'm just looking. I know the work plan is going to be a significant discussion. Do you want to touch upon this Article 5, Section 5, Article 10, Section 5 of the main Constitution? And
Yeah.
please,
Paul, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I was going to suggest on that and on, well, basically looking at the remainder of the agenda, if you'll bear with me for a sec. The next item would have been the update on the sustenance fishing study. I could send around basically an update on that. I had a conversation with the primary researcher yesterday, and the 3 researchers are meeting today. So with your permission, then I would follow up the meeting by sending a written update to all of you. And that would address a question that John Banks asked earlier before the meeting started. I would make sure that we address that in the update. If that sounds okay.
I would think that's agreeable to me, as long as the rest of the commission is in concurrence. Once the update, today's meeting occurs, if we can get a more up-to-date update, if everybody would agree to that. I see thumbs up going. Any opposition to that? I'll ask that. Seems to be the easier route.
Okay, then I will touch base with them after their meeting today and update what was provided to me yesterday and send that around.
Be awesome.
On Article 10, Section 5, just to briefly summarize, we've been, you know, we've had a contractor working on research and a report. There's a draft report. This involves the removal of the Article 10, Section 5 language from the printed versions of the main Constitution in 1875. We are, I would say, close to having a final report. I have sent that draft report around. Yesterday, there was a panel discussion. Some of you may have tuned in for that. There was a panel discussion hosted by the Maine Historical Society on the current exhibit that they have called Redact, which is the product of research by a volunteer researcher for the Historical Society. The panel was moderated by Darren Ranko and included Donald Loring and Sherry Mitchell and Corey Hinton. There were, in listening to that, I heard some things that and I know Jed tuned in for it as well. So we want to follow up on some of those things. So I would suggest just that we have it on the next agenda, the next meeting, and that by then we likely will have a final draft report to submit after taking into account and following up on what we heard and what we learned more about from the REDAC project. So, does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we've discussed with Rena the tribal state legislation, and then the next item, the work plan. You're exactly right. There's no way we're going to really be able to address the extensive work plan items today. And again, I would recommend that we actually schedule a specific meeting to do that. The next item was planning an event or other actions to honor former MITSC members. I'll just briefly summarize that Zeke and Sandy and Bert and I have conferred on that. We were going to recommend that we try to do it virtually in December. And I guess my feeling at this point is that it's probably going to be more realistic if we try to pull that together for January. I don't think we should go beyond that, but I think it's probably not going to be a realistic to put it all together for a December meeting, assuming we're having a December meeting. But I would propose that Bert and Sandy and Zeke and I continue to plan for that, and then send around the proposal for the virtual event that we suggest that we have.
Outstanding. So looking at the agenda, I would almost ask that, could I get somebody to make a motion to have a December meeting to focus exclusively on the work plan of this commission? I see hands going up. I just need somebody to make the motion.
Motion.
Do we have a second? Mr. Checkaway and seconded the motion. So Paul, if you could come up with some tentative dates, cognizant to the legislation going back in and going back out and Christmas breaks and everything else, if we could do a virtual meeting in December to kind of come up with a very workable plan that you guys are comfortable with. And I think this is part of what I said way back in the beginning. I don't know what the commission's expectation is of me. I'm pretty good at getting things done, but it's not going to be about me. It's what you as a commission would like to achieve. Go ahead, Bert.
I was already unmuted. Anyhow, I was thinking about it, and I had a little bit of a discussion. I think Paul and I on meetings. I know not too long ago, I think it might have been the last meeting we had, or a couple before that. Anyhow, we talked about, or someone brought up maybe just having a meeting every quarter. Since that meeting, I've thought about it, and evidently, I wasn't the only one. But this virtual meeting thing, it's not as though we have to worry about driving across the state to get to a meeting. Right. I don't have a problem, and I'm if anyone else has any ideas on it or suggestions on it, I have no problem because of the workload that we do have right now. There's a lot of things that are going on. You know, every one of us as commissioners need to be kept abreast of them. And there's, you know, like I said, there's plenty of work to do. I don't see a problem with having a meeting each month. We can figure on certain times when we have something a little, you know, bigger, maybe each quarter. But I think as far as our commission meetings, being able to get together and discuss these things, I don't see a problem with having a meeting each month. And the other thing is, you know, and I mentioned this to Paul the other day, was that Paul Tebow the other day, that, you know, some of the issues that come into play when we try to schedule our meetings, we always have a tendency to try to set those meetings during the day, during a work day. But with this as it is now, I don't see any problem with possibly having a meeting, you know, after people's regular work day, you know, like later on, maybe early evening, or even, you know, like we talked about, even a retreat. You know, we haven't had a retreat in so long. Usually a retreat lasts a couple days. You know, schedule a time. If we can figure a way to do it, you know, because there's, you know, how many commissioners have you know, been a part of a retreat, you know, with MITSC. You know, I would say there's several here that have not. So we can figure a way to schedule that as well, you know, to where we take a weekend or a couple days where that can happen. You know, we don't have to stay on here the whole time. Maybe figure a time to take a break, normally when we had our lunch breaks or whatever. But even in a physical retreat that we've had, you know, we break for lunch, but really while we're eating, we're still discussing. You know, so we if we could figure a way to do that, that would be awesome. But maybe, and you know, again, I go to all of the commissioners here, to think about that. You know, maybe we can schedule some of our meetings, because, you know, one of the things that we have to make sure that they're public meetings. When you look at a lot of these meetings that go across with other areas, you know, the other public meetings for other groups, a lot of their meetings are in the evening. Why? Because the public, you know, and we are, like I said earlier, we are tribal state commission, and our meetings, you know, our normal meetings are public meetings. And if we're scheduling them always during the workday, not a lot of the public aren't able to be here. And they are important, you know, that they're some of the things, you know, their concerns, or suggestions, they are very important to us. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
As long as it doesn't interfere with hunting in the evening. So if you start cutting into my deer stand time, we're gonna have issues, bro.
You just have to bring your thing up there on the stand with you and speak very quietly.
So as I was saying, Paul, if we can try to get something on the books tentatively, I know there are people that have particular schedules. The further out, the better for everybody. And then just do that doodle poll or whatever to come to a date where it works for everyone. Does that sound fair?
I think on this one, I will do the doodle poll.
Yep.
And
And I'd be remiss if I did not thank those people. There was a couple key members that did the co-chair during Jamie's transition, Mr. Banks, and who was the other one, Paul Tebow?
Kevin Hancock.
That really carried the ball and made things continue to move forward. And it's super difficult when you have a ship no rudder and no steering wheel. So those two took up that role, and I have to commend them both for their efforts over this interim period. And hopefully you didn't set the bar too high. I'd kind of like a lower bar to measure up to. So, you know, don't challenge me like this. Go ahead, Rena. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just listening in on some of the comments and stuff brought this question to mind, and I just want to follow up on it. I think, Paul, you mentioned it earlier in getting together with the chiefs, and but in the, you know, we talked about, you know, LD 291 and how it was reestablished and put some energy into it. And what I'm seeing with MITSC as well, with you know, the Mills administration actively appointing, you know, the state commissioners to MITSC and really putting a lot more effort in what I see, you know, the formation of MITSC. But it brings me to raise this question. Considering probably 2 years, I think, back up and running between the tribal and state commissioners meeting with MITSC. My question is this, as you mentioned earlier, what is the connection in reporting the activities from MITSC back to the tribal chiefs, as well as what is the follow-up reporting back to the state administration? And would that be the governor's office? You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the suggestion to have suggestions as to how the tribes could better engage with the governor's office. I think I just kind of want to drop it, you know, to MITSC if there's any connection there to follow through with that as well. But that's my question. What's the connection back on reporting the activities of MITSC to the tribes? And what's the connection back reporting on the activities to the state?
Mr. Tebow? Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's such a great question. I brought this up a meeting or two ago and said from the state side, the current status quo, I don't mean to be cynical, but I don't expect to ever again hear from anybody from the state. My view is there was a task to be accomplished, which was to appoint commissioners. Once they were appointed and confirmed, that was like crossed off the list. I've not had any contact with anybody from the state as a state commissioner since I was appointed, and I don't expect to ever hear from the state, to be honest with you. So I think this is that a great way to strengthen our value would be to institutionalize some connectivity back to the state and back to the tribe. So I just wanted to say, Paul, I think Rena's asking a super important question that we really should take note of and focus on and try to create some change there.
Complete agreement, Master Hancock. And I think, Mr. Tebow, you started to say something.
Well, I guess I would just add to what Rena and Kevin have said that, I mean, I guess it's my understanding that the tribal commissioners have a fairly organic, you know, communication with, you know, their tribal leadership. I mean, if I'm wrong about that, you know, someone ought to tell me, but I certainly has always been my impression that our tribal members on the commission are in frequent contact with tribal leadership. We haven't institutionalized that. If I could do something more in terms of directly communicating to the tribal leaders, although it's been our approach to do that through the commissioners, and to rely on the commissioners to be our liaison to the tribal leadership largely. On the state side, I had the same experience as when I was a state commissioner. My personal view is it is really on the state commissioners to pursue this. If I understood from the last meeting that that there was going to be a conference of the state commissioners to talk about exactly that. And I don't know if that has happened. If there's a directive to me to try to set up a meeting for the state commissioners, specifically the state commissioners with the governor's office, I would do that. But I mean, as far as I know, Kevin is correct that, you know, that communication really isn't happening, not just with the governor's office, but with agency, you know, heads and legislators. So
the check the box has been done.
Yeah, the check the box was done 16 months ago, but I'm looking at our directive here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Banks. Ziba.
Yeah, I was just thinking one avenue for the state commissioners would be to maintain some kind of a communication channel to the governor's office through the Native American liaison. Now, I know that Donna Loring's getting done in that position, but I'm assuming perhaps that the governor will be appointing somebody else to fill that position.
All in.
Yeah, that would be a likely source of channel for communication for the state members. I'm just thinking out loud here, not telling anybody how to do their business.
No, and I'll echo that. I think, and I remember this, we went to that Point Lookout or whatever down in Rockland area, Rockport, Camden. And I remember the chief asking, was this going to be memorialized and sent out to all the chiefs? Now, I was there as a council member and I never received anything. Now, that does not to say that it wasn't done. I'm just saying it was never matriculated down to us as council. So I don't know, but I think it's relevant to exactly what Rena just said, that if we're going to be effective, the communication channel has to go both ways. It has to go to the tribes and it also has to go to the state. The tribes can be, and I think, Sandy actually put it in her chat box, was what does the tribal leadership want? We can talk about it all day. And I asked tribal leadership, did you want me to make this a MITSC issue? And I never got a response. So there's a responsibility from the chiefs that if they want us to do something, they need to let us know. I can't, through osmosis, just put my head against the tribal government wall and know what they want. So that's where we rely on you guys. But I think the horse is dead. We've beat it up pretty good. We know what we need to do, and we have to figure out, which may be part of that work plan, of how do we want to get this information both going out and then coming back in. Does that sound fair, everyone? I see some nods.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you.
Rena.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock, and everyone else that contributed to a response to my question. I appreciate it. I would want to add to John Banks's statement in regards to, the chief tribal liaison, or the title of Donna Loring. Donna submitted her resignation that was effective immediately. So there is no individual sitting in that position at this point. So the question is whether or not the governor will be filling that position in the near future, or if he'll be refilling it at all. I hope, it's certainly not another check to the box, as was mentioned earlier.
Mr. Chair, might I just add something?
Please.
Just very quickly, I think we 100% have the ability to hold dialogue with the governor's office and various agency heads. I don't think there was any resistance to that. What I might suggest, though, is that we get through our work planning discussion and set some priorities for what we're seeking to convey for a message and priorities in the coming year. We've spent the better part of 18 months at this point really trying to get this commission back to a functioning agency, getting some
Absolutely.
administrative items taken care of. We have spent less time on some of the more substantive issues, and I think everybody wants to get to those. But I would suggest maybe we get through those first and decide what we want to share for a platform with those folks. And then I think, I don't mean to speak for all the state commissioners, but I think we would all be delighted to participate in that discussion.
So that rounds it right into that work plan discussion, which I think we've already identified, Mr. Tebow, that we're going to do a doodle poll to get everything set up, and that'll tie into the future meeting schedule, et cetera. But Mr. Hancock, I've been wondering, I didn't want to file a police report, but I see my wall hanging stuck on your wall behind you. Just put that in the mail. That's gorgeous. I like that.
Yeah, well, I happen to have a good defense. That came from the singing horse trading post on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So I know where I got it. Sounds like you have one quite like it.
I need one that looks just like that. So, Paul, we've already extended past our allowed time. And new business, and James put it in a nutshell. We've now gotten the administrative rigmarole out of the way. You've got a knucklehead like me that says, "Oh yeah, I'll take this role," without even knowing what I'm ready to dive into. So that's just typical infantry mentality. I think that we're good. And once you do the doodle poll, we can set up for that December meeting. But I think my personal opinion is that we're moving forward. This, instead of just racing around. Go ahead, Paul.
Question, just a question on that. How long a meeting are you willing to do in December on the work plan?
Ooh, Mr. Polches, go ahead. 5 hours?
I would say, if anything, and anyone else can chime in if they disagree, but I think 2 hours is kind of hard to work on a lot of the things that we need to. However, that being said, I think maybe plan a time where we can do a couple hours, take a break, come back for a couple hours, because that way we're not sitting here in front of the screen this whole time.
Zoom fatigue.
But yeah, exactly. And I think that it's going to take more than a couple hours to deal with some of these things. So I would suggest maybe we find a way to, do a couple hours, take a break, come back in a couple more hours.
I see some disgruntled face. Go ahead, Sandy.
I think it would make good sense to have a work session and lay out exactly what it is we want to do with this work plan. And then from there, take smaller digestible bites of it so that we don't feel overwhelmed at the beginning. Because when Bert was talking, I was like, oh, I can't breathe. I wouldn't be able to do it for that long either. But if we have it broken down and kind of prioritized what's the low-hanging fruit and then what is the most difficult to accomplish, then we can set a schedule of regular meetings. And if we have to have a work group, then so be it. And the work group then does that task and brings it back to the rest of the commission.
That sounds good. I see a big thumbs up, Sandy. So I'm saying at least 2 hours on that initial meeting is an agreeable. And from that 2 hours, we can create that schedule. Do we have an expert planner here? I'm looking at Mr. Rosen, but I don't know.
Not me.
I think you've got the in-house expertise on planning. You mean coordinating a plan? That Paul, I think, can handle that.
Okay.
I think that in the collective, we all have strengths. So let's all bring our strengths to the table and get this done.
Right. So on that meeting, I would like it to be one agenda item, work plan development, and that's it. And let's not get caught around the axle about talking about this, that, or the other. Unless I get a big deer, and then I'll talk about that, because that's just my nature.
I have just, I guess, a follow-up question is,
Yes, sir.
do you want to have any other meeting in December, or is that going to be the meeting in December?
It's kind of quiet. I say we have the first meeting and then a potential follow-on meeting scheduled tentatively.
Well, I'm sorry, I meant just a regular MITSC meeting. Should we plan that January will be the next regular MITSC meeting?
James, you started to say something.
Yeah, that was going to be my vote. If we're going to do the planning session in December, let's have another regular meeting in January.
Okay. And if we have consensus on that, I see a bunch of big thumbs up. Paul, there's your answer.
Thank you.
Our special meeting in December, and then the January MITSC meeting. So every other month, at least until we get caught up, seems to be reasonable, right? Thumbs up and the head nods. So at this point, how do you normally close out your meetings? Do you make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, Bert makes a motion to adjourn.
I'll make
Every
a
time.
motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
After the chair sings. Paul.
Second.
You don't want to hear me sing. Everybody will be crying. So we have a second. All in favor, thumbs up.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Me.
Sandy?
Andy.
So at this point, I thank everyone for their time. Excellent first meeting. I don't know if they'll all go this smoothly. Bert and Paul, you guys can't talk at the same time. If you want to argue offline. All right. Have a great day, and everyone, please stay safe.
Bye,
Stay safe,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a good
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Paul. Thanks.
Whew, thank you, Mr. Banks.
Awesome.
Upchurch.
Just love you.
Aha.